No matter what business you're in the business of relationships. 1 in 4 people can actually have someone where they can ring and speak to. So if you're a personal trainer or if you're a business owner, if you're a coach, which I know a lot of your listeners are, you play such a major role in people's lives because guaranteed they probably don't have anyone that they can even talk to about this.
What's up, fitness friends? Welcome back to the Future of Fitness podcast and interview series. This is your host, Eric Malzone, and this is episode number 142. I get to talk to my friend, Ali Watts. So Ali has been in the fitness industry for quite some time. She is originally from Australia. She spent time in Japan. She spent time in Hong Kong, I believe. She tells her whole story. Now she's in New York City. And she's been doing this for a long time. She has her own podcast, Ali Fitness, and lots of great guests on there. So I highly recommend checking that out. It's just a great conversation. Some of the big topics that we get into is what is the difference between fitness and health, right? What is the difference? And I'm a firm believer, as a lot of people who have been guests on the show, that the future of the fitness profession is moving into health coaching. Now, whether you like that term or not, I know it's been coming under some scrutiny, but that's ultimately the goal, right? If we want to hit the broader market, health coaching is the way to go. It's we get to work on all the things in people's lives that make them fit and healthy, not just a couple hours that you get in the gym every week, right? What else did we talk about? We talked about how she utilizes breath work in her practice as well for both her clients and herself, improving health, digestion, anxiety, stress, all that stuff. And she gave us a couple cool ways to implement that. So yeah, if you haven't yet, please go to iTunes and leave a review. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Subscribe and leave a review. It goes a long way. And I'll read it on air. You leave a review, I will read it on air as promised every time. I'll make you famous. And before I get into the episode as well, I want to talk to you about Elite Gym Insider. So go to elitegyminsiders.com if you are a gym owner or just a general fitness entrepreneur or somebody who wants to be talking to people like that. You want to go. It's a free Slack community. It doesn't cost you a penny. There is an application. We want to make sure that we uphold the quality of the community. It's about 350, 400 people in there right now. Really smart people, really open people, great networking. And on top of it, you're going to get discounts, right? Discounts on things like digital marketing services, business coaching, educational products, all kinds of services and products that mean something to you, stuff that we have tested, that we like. We don't just recommend things that we haven't used or we're not familiar with. We want to make sure it works, right? If we're going to partner with them, we're going to make sure it works. So go check it out, elitegyminsiders.com, and fill out the application, and you'll get to talk to people like Ali Watts. Right? She's in there as well. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Episode number 142, my good friend, Ali Watts. All right, and we're live. Ali Watts, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Yeah, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to you over the last 3-6 months, and it's always been great. And I'm excited to get you on here. You're a coach, business person, athlete, podcaster. You do many things, and I think you and I are both guilty of. If I wouldn't say guilty, but if someone said, "Hey, you guys are multi-potentialites," we'd be like, "Yeah, we do a lot of stuff," right?
Yeah, I think we sort of have these big visions, and we want to help and connect as many people as we can, right?
Yeah. So let's kick it off. Give everyone your story, Ali. For people who don't know you, give your background and kind of how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, well, where I am now, I'm sitting here in Manhattan. I've got a broken nose, but it's getting better. Don't ask me about that. And I've been living here in Manhattan, New York for about almost 2 years. I actually was 4 years in Hong Kong before that. And you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Australia. So the reason why I'm here now, I guess, is my personal journey of fitness and health, helping others and realizing that I need to come to the States because my mission of helping as many people as I can with health and fitness, what better place to do it than America, where clearly it's needed.
Yeah. So you went Australia, Hong Kong, US. Is there any stops?
Yeah, no. So I lived in Hong Kong for 4 years. I've actually lived in Japan for 6 years as well. So on and off from Australia. So I've been around a bit. Maybe eventually back in Australia.
Yeah. How was tell me a little bit about the experience about living in Hong Kong and Japan. What were those?
Yeah, so I always was fascinated with Japanese language and wanted to learn another language. And being Australian, you don't actually, most people only speak, I was going to say English, but it's really Australian. So I wanted to learn Japanese, and I decided that after failing Japanese at school just for not attending classes, I realized that I had to go there to learn it. So I went over like fairly soon after school, and I just hitchhiked around for a year. And back then it wasn't even, people didn't even know what hitchhiking was. So I did that for a year, and then realized I actually wanted to learn the language formally. And so I went to university and studied linguistics and Japanese. And then went back several times. I actually won a scholarship from the Japanese government, so they paid me to do a master's degree in linguistics over there. So that was fun. And then went back again to work as a business development manager for Oxford University Press, and did some editing for them as well. And then my husband was like, hey, Japan's sort of fun. Let's go live in a different spot. So we lived in like Osaka, Kobe, lots of different places. And that time he's like, oh, I'll get a job and doing what I like doing, and we'll go over and do that. So we did that. And then back to Australia. And then Hong Kong was mainly, I guess, for my husband, wanted to sort of, he's in the finance, IT sort of industry, so I wanted to experience that. And that was great living in Hong Kong. I worked with a lot of athletes, semi-professional, professional athletes, and that's sort of where I realised that this health and fitness thing is not quite right, and there's lots of work to be done. And I think, my next step was really sort of stepping out of my comfort zone. I felt like I helped as many people as I could there in Hong Kong, but that was really the next step, to be surrounded with knowledgeable people like yourself, and then help so many people that really do need help when it comes to health and fitness.
Yeah. And you're a pretty competitive athlete too, right? So give us a little bit of your athletic background.
Not really, funnily enough. I mean, I like all sorts of different sort of anything to do with fitness I like. So I like doing lots of different things. I was pretty much, I guess cycling at one stage was probably the biggest sort of thing for me. And I was pretty high level, I guess. I didn't actually compete, but I probably, was an ACAT, maybe cyclist. I had a fairly bad cycling injury, and that made me never want to ride again, or definitely.
Was it an accident or what happened?
Yeah. So I was riding along at about 50 kilometres an hour, say 30 miles an hour, and it was actually just before a race, which I didn't typically do many races, but this one I was sort of quite excited about. It was a 3-day cycling race, stage race, I think 3 or 4 day in Thailand, and it was a week or two before. It was our last training ride actually, and a couple of new members joined, and that's always a bit scary. We're in a peloton, so you're really on the back of the wheel, and someone just stopped. I don't know what happened in front of them, but I hit their wheel and came off. Had my helmet split open, so lucky I had my helmet on, and that was like 4 months of concussion. I tore 7 ligaments in my left shoulder. You've only got 8 ligaments holding your shoulder together.
Barely hanging on.
Yeah, so the surgeon was pretty impressed. He was happy. He was sort of excited, and they were like, "You're never going to be able to, like, maybe in a couple of years you'll be able to do a few pull-ups." I'm like, "How long will it be before I can do like 100 pull-ups?" And he's like, I don't think you'll be able to do that. So 6 months later, I could do that. So I was happy. But I did a lot of serious rehab and gymnastics, strength and conditioning, which is how I got into that over here in Manhattan.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. 30 miles per hour crashing like that. That's scary.
Yeah, I was really lucky. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the professionals do that and survive. So, yeah, I've had enough head injuries though for a while.
Yeah. I remember I got my first concussion in high school, and then after that, they just come so easy, right?
I know.
I'm not saying that like bragging is just, I would rather never have gotten one. But yeah, they just seem to happen. You have a podcast too. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, I do. Actually, back on the concussion thing. So when I was 9, I got hit in the head with a golf club and was in a coma for several months. So I've definitely had my fair share of hits. But yeah, so I run a podcast. It's called Ali Fitness, and it's about bringing health into fitness. And I sort of wanted to do it for a bit. And then after my accident, I was like, I almost died. What would I regret? I've got to start that podcast. So I started it like the next day from hospital. And
wait, what?
It's about bringing health into fitness because
you started from the hospital?
Sorry?
You started it from the hospital?
Yeah. Yep. I'm like, bring in all my gear. I've got to do So I worked it all out and just did it. And and so I realized, and I was guilty of this as well, is that people, general public, think that if you're fit, you're healthy.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fit people that I trained were definitely fit. Were they healthy? I would say almost all of them weren't. Mm-hmm. And that was quite worrisome. And then I started addressing my behaviors and thinking that, sleep wasn't really that important. And, the old saying, you'll sleep when you're dead. And all of these sort of, philosophies that I was following were just actually anti-health. And so I really wanted to help educate people that were perhaps fit but not so healthy, how to actually get healthy, because at one stage in their life, health was going to become the most important thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think it's a huge point. We're going to dive into it. I have a feeling quite deep in the next little bit, but and I would sit people down for an introduction to my CrossFit gym. I would make a distinct point of saying like, okay, what you see on TV is CrossFit as sport, right? What you see here is CrossFit for health and general fitness. There's a huge difference, because if you look at a lot of those athletes, yeah, they may look and they are extremely fit, but they're actually moving away from health in so many areas. They're probably not sleeping well. Their digestive issues are stacked up. They're chronically inflamed and all kinds of things are going on. They're mentally not doing so hot. That's just the part of being an athlete, right? And sacrificing those things. But a lot of athletes are sacrificing those things without being conscious of what the actual long-term issues are, right? And I know you've worked with a lot of professionals. Tell me about like your evolution. Like, when did you start to realize that? And then how have you started to incorporate that into your practice?
Yeah, so I guess what I noticed was that, people talk about their values, mm-hmm. but the best way to see someone's values is how they actually live, their actual actions, as opposed to what they say their values are. I'm sure you'd agree. So yeah. I noticed that people would say, athletes would say, my health and fitness are the most important thing. But then if you looked at what they were doing, it just wasn't, it didn't make sense. And like you said, the further, and in a way, to be a top level athlete, you have to compromise your health. I mean, it's not natural for the body to do that. And look, I'm all for, if you've got a goal and you want to achieve that through fitness, then great. But just be aware of how important that is in the overall long-term things. And I guess the thing is, like, as I got older and saw people who were quite healthy and fit when they were 20, 30. And then when they got into their 40s and 50s, you could see how quickly that they were actually deteriorating. And then I started addressing some issues that I was obviously dealing with but not realizing. And so that's sort of really where it became apparent. And so an example would be, there were women who were just having all these symptoms, and they were just too early to get these type of symptoms. And I myself struggled a lot with body weight. I didn't have enough body fat, so I spent 7 years doing IVF. And I don't wish that on my worst enemy. And so I really just wanted to make people aware of like, is your goal really going to match up with your overall purpose? And my point here is most people want longevity, long-term health. And is that going to compromise that in any way? And if so, that might be okay for a short period of time, but just to be really upfront and honest and realize, well, what can I do to actually prevent any long-term damage?
Yeah. I've read something somewhere, maybe it was like Tony Gentilcore. It's like, in your 20s, you want your abs, right? In your 30s, people want to be strong. In their 40s, people want to be healthy. And then on beyond. How do you define health? What is that definition for you? How do you envision it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, and it's obviously changed a lot for me over the time. And I think now it's not just, and so much of when we talk about health is about the physical appearance of health. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wish, instead of seeing people like the outside of someone, I sometimes wish we could just see their internals and their blood work. On Instagram, instead of posting what you look like and your abs, actually just posting your blood work, or your organs and what they look like, or something like that, because it's so much more about that. And, it affects your whole well-being, but also a huge part of that. And I run a health coaching company, and I have health coaches, and a lot of them are actually trained in psychology, because health is so much more than the physical, and it's so much more than what you eat. And it doesn't matter if you're eating great, if you're stressed, or if you're dealing with emotional issues, then this is going to affect your health. And so in answer to your question, health is, I feel, a balance of fitness, spiritual, your mind, and your physical, and it all just coming together.
Yeah. It's that's really funny about Instagram, by the way. I think that's hysterical, because what if someone stopped showing booty shots and they showed like, hey, this is what my poop looks like, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that are like the real metrics of health. You mentioned a really interesting, before we start recording, you mentioned a really interesting statistic about 1 in 4 people.
Yeah, I mean, I was really astounded to hear, and I'm sure it's the same in other countries as well, but you hear stats about the US. 1 in 4 people at maximum could actually ring someone, a friend, and talk to them about something, or could go and sort of even go and see them, which is probably even more unlikely. So that statistic alone, I mean, imagine if you're having health issues or anything and you don't have a friend or someone that you can console in. And so I guess back to that whole thing about what is health, I think a huge part of health is your relationships. And I hear you talk about relationships and connections all the time, and it's such a big part of any type of business. No matter what business you're in the business of relationships.
Yeah.
And that goes with your personal life as well. If you don't have friends and family, then your health will be affected. If you're not part of a community, your health will be affected. I mean, how often do you see where the husband or wife, they've been married for a long time, the husband dies, the wife soon dies afterwards because that connection, human connections, is lost. And so 1 in 4 people can actually have someone where they can ring and speak to. So if you're a personal trainer, or if you're a business owner, if you're a coach, which I know a lot of your listeners are, you play such a major role in people's lives, because guaranteed they probably don't have anyone that they can even talk to about this.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, my office at the gym, once a week I'd have somebody crying, right? Not because of anything I did, but because they just, felt comfortable enough to just let things go, and they didn't have anybody else. And that's really important. And talking to entrepreneurs too, and the value of relationships is, people just like to kind of cruise over their personal relationships because they don't think they want to categorize it or compartmentalize it differently than their business. But if my wife and I had a disagreement the night prior, right? My business, I will not approach my meetings the same way in the full capacity that I could the next day. It's just the way it is, right? That's a very stressful situation. Anything that's happening at home is going to affect the rest of everything you do. You can't compartmentalize these things, right? Stress is stress, whether it's relationships at home, business, what you're doing at work, or how much sleep you're getting, environmental. This is all stress, and it's something that people need to consider from all aspects.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the athletes that I was working with, obviously they do a high level stress workout very often.
Sure.
But what they don't realize is that your body can't tell you the difference between stress, workout stress, and relationship stress and work stress. So it's compiling stress on top of stress on top of stress, and something's got to give. And I think that's a really important point that you make there, is like, so how are you dealing with stress, and should you be adding workout stress on top of relationship stress? And and that's where I started really evaluating things like how important is stress when it comes to health. And if I could sort of pinpoint anything, if you said to me, look, I'm really stressed, I don't exercise, I eat poorly, all these things, where would be the best thing to start? I would say stress, and not necessarily eliminating stress, which of course can be done and is effective. But let's face it, most people are going to have stress in their lives, no matter what lives they live. And obviously it's how you deal with the stress and what sort of things that you implement in your life that help you deal with stress. And I know I've heard you speak about it a lot, and even yourself who does get anxiety, in the mornings. I've heard you talk about that and how you deal with that, and having that protocol of, that breath work, the Wim Hof breath work that you do. Mm-hmm. I'm sure without that, you just would not be dealing with stress very well, and therefore your health would be majorly affected, not to mention, your business, your relationships, it all comes together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I woke up this morning, got up a little earlier than I normally do. I woke up at like 4:45 and I checked my phone, and then I got a text that wasn't great news, right? And immediately that was like, okay, anxiety, cortisol rose, and I could just feel it. I'm like, oh God. So, but then I got into my morning routine, right? The cold exposure, the Wim Hof, all that stuff. And, right as rain, felt ready to tackle the issues. And that's been a huge thing for me is to be aware of it. And I think that's number one, is like, are you aware of the patterns that you're in? And I'd be curious to hear, when you work with your clients and you start to make them aware of stress, how do you tackle that conversation? Right? How do you make them aware? How do you isolate things? How do you get them to start systematically approaching and mitigating stress in their life?
Yeah. And so to your point, I think that actually mitigating stress can be quite difficult, because depending on the type of person you are, it doesn't matter. Like I could find something very stressful that you would just go, hey, how do you find that stressful? So no matter what you mitigate in my life, I still might find somewhere. I'll find something to be stressed about. So I do think mitigation has its place, but I think just implementing some really important habits. And I guess one of those things is obviously fitness and doing workouts. So that's one area where I've found people who aren't used to working out, and obviously there's a lot of science backing this up as well, but really implementing workouts into your daily routine and movement. But also, I mean, if I was to choose, one thing, then I would say breath work, or, meditation, but whatever meditation is for you. I don't like to say this is the type of meditation that you should do.
Yeah.
However, I do think that breath work is a great way to get into meditation, because it's actually making the person concentrate on the breath, and it's giving them something to do, as well as having huge benefits. And so that's something that, like, as part of my programs, I have breath work as a big part, because a small amount of breath work can change your day, as I know you're aware. But also on this stress thing, and what's become really apparent to me, and I guess where I've started to move into a lot too, just organically, I've started helping a lot of business owners in the fitness industry who are in that 1 in 4. They don't have anyone to talk to about their business, and obviously their personal life is being affected. And they're meant to be the example of health. And yet what they're telling their clients, they're not doing themselves. And they're suffering hugely from stress and lack of sleep and all these things that we're telling our clients not to do. And so I feel that a lot of your listeners can probably resonate with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be curious to hear too, well, a couple things. I want to know what type of breath work you actually encourage people and coach people to do. The other thing, coming from Australia, spending time in Hong Kong and Japan, how different is the American culture when it comes to stress from your perspective? Like how do we deal with things over here? We tend to sweep things under the rug a little bit, right? For lack of a better term. But how do you, from a cultural perspective, how do you see the difference between the states? But let's talk about first. Let's talk about the breath work. I'm curious about that. What do you assign to people?
Yeah. So with the breath work, I mean, it's actually not rocket science. It's breath, and
right.
There are a lot of different exercises that you can do, and some are more sort of work on different things. So, but there's a lot of different schools of breath work. But at the end of the day, it's just about breathing, and there's no really right or wrong way to do it. It's a matter of, well, what are you trying to accomplish? And so what I tend to use, like I'm fairly familiar with a lot of different types of breath work out there, like Somma and Wim Hof, and I've recently done some training with XPT. I'm not sure if you know Laird Hamilton.
It's Laird Hamilton's, yeah. I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast on that. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I quite like that because it's very simple, and there's different I guess exercises that you can do to accomplish different things. So, for example, there's a great and part of my course I've put in like a bedtime protocol. So before you go to bed, this is a really great way to breathe and get into that parasympathetic state much quicker than if you were just to jump into bed. And then, so the basic premise of that would be your exhale would be longer than your inhale. And you would, sort of really concentrate on that. But at the same time, you wouldn't let your breath, you wouldn't get breathless or what I call like breath hunger, air hunger, because you don't want to create any stress. So you'd use a count that's suitable for you, and it depends on you. So, for example, I might be comfortable with an inhale and exhale of, say, 4 and 6, whereas you're like, oh, no, I can't do that. I need to do like 2 and 4 or whatever, And so I don't like to set direct numbers necessarily, but, most people are within a certain. And then I like it's funny with warm-ups, people are so adamant that they have to warm up their muscles. So they'll go, I've got to go on the treadmill and warm up before I do my weights. And I mean, that in itself, like, isn't actually activating the muscles that they're going to use. So how valuable is it to do that is another question. But then why aren't you doing a breathwork warm-up before you work out? Because you want to be able to, if you're not breathing correctly during your everyday, then how are you going to possibly be breathing correctly when you work out? And so warming up your breath and getting into that breath is actually really important. So I've got a great sort of pre-workout breath work that I recommend. And then a lot of the other breath work I do is like, especially to help athletes with their performance. It's amazing if you get someone who is a great athlete. I can almost guarantee you, unless they've done some concentrated breath work, their breath isn't very good, and yet they're an amazing athlete. Work on breath for about 3 weeks, and they become their performance levels just go through the roof. There's a lot of studies around that as well, and so one of the I guess the goals of the breath work that I like to do is sort of increasing that CO2 tolerance, which in effect really helps with athletes' performance or anyone's performance. So that's sort of what I do. I also mix it in with I'm a long-term yoga instructor. One of the breath works, well, there's 2 from yoga that I really love using. So I've sort of got a combination of all different breath work. But the 2 that I really like from yoga is the Nadi Shodhana, which is the alternate nostril breathing. And that's basically where you inhale through your left, exhale through your right, inhale through your right, exhale through your left, and you close it off with your thumb and ring finger. And that is a very calming, great for releasing anxiety, and I love that one. And I guess the other one, which is not so much breath, but you can sort of concentrate on your breath, is the Yoga Nidra, which is like a sleep meditation, but it's something that if people struggle with meditation, they won't struggle with this. They just follow along with the instructions. And once again, I include that in all my courses because I just think it's such a great way to get into total parasympathetic state. Most people fall asleep, and so I do recommend it to do before sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing if, even if you just incorporate a little bit of breath work but at bedtime, how quickly you can just pass out, and is all this stuff available to you on your website's Ali Fitness, right?
Yeah. So my website is ali.fitness. Or aliwattsfitness.com as well. We'll go to the same place. And so they're actually not available there, but they can do any of my like 10-day jumpstart or my 28-day program, and all of those programs have all of that.
Awesome.
In it. But in answer to your other question about different nationalities and how they deal with exercise and health, and you do see a profound difference. Not so much between, say, Australia and the US, although there are some quite significant, but more so between the Asian culture versus the Western culture. So I'll start with like the Australian American sort of difference. Australians are fairly well known to be travelers.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Americans, and perhaps it's because the US is so big, although Australia's pretty big as well, tend to only travel within the US, and even then not so much. And they don't tend to take long periods of time off work. They're very, very much work is the number one, and you shouldn't really take long vacations, and that's the general sense that I get. Am I right? Or
oh, totally. I mean, every time I go travel somewhere outside of the States, or even in the States, there's two countries that I tend to see a lot of people, Australians and Germans. They're just everywhere. Like everywhere you go, Australians and Germans, they're always there. And it's part of the culture. And, I've heard on some other podcasts, and I tend to agree that, if the United States made it like mandatory that after college you had to go travel, or after school you had to go travel for X amount of time, what a different culture it would be, right? How drastically that would change our American culture, because you get so much perspective. I just got back from 10 days on an island off the coast of Honduras called Roatan. And, I immediately came back and my perspective was different. First thing I do is when I go to those places, I'm like, well, what if I just cash it all in now? We're like, how long can we live on this island? 20 years, probably, right? It's like $500 a month for expenses. But you start to see that how hard we work as an American culture. We just work. And I don't have any rules around me, right? Like I don't need to be anywhere at a certain time. I don't need to work X amount of hours per month or per week, but I find myself doing it anyway and being busy at times just for the sake of being busy. Like I feel like, oh, well, I should work 8 hours. Well, why?
I do get a sense that sort of in the American culture, it's sort of good to be busy. And if you say people are happy, whereas I'm more of the like, I don't want to be busy. And maybe it's more of a laid back sort of style in Australia. Not to say that, Australians don't work hard, but there's definitely more of a less emphasis on that and more emphasis on, you should travel. I mean, to give you an idea, I was talking to one of my coaches the other day and I'm like, you've got to go to Australia. And she's like, I'll have to get my passport. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't have a passport? you haven't been overseas?
Yeah.
And to me, that's just unheard. I mean, to give you an idea, my daughter, before she turned, on her 5th birthday, I was looking through her passport and she'd been to 20 countries.
Awesome.
She was 5. And I don't know how many. She's 6 now, so I don't know how many. But I've lost count. But I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but yeah, definitely that's one big difference. And I think to your point, just, going overseas and you notice the difference and you came back with a different perspective and I can really relate to that. Could we just move here and live here for 20 years? Because I've been to Bali and Thailand several times and I've thought that several times. But the only problem is if you ever want to go back and visit your family, you can't afford it.
Right.
So, but I do think that there's definitely a different, and because of that mentality of traveling, Australians probably don't put that same emphasis on work, and therefore could potentially put their health before. But that's not to say that Australians. I think actually Australia overtook the obesity award as from the Americans in one of the years. So I definitely don't think Australia are a good example, but I do think the Asian cultures are a great example. And obviously things are changing because Asia's becoming more westernized. But to give you an idea, I lived with a Japanese family for 6 months. And the grandmother was 89 and she rode her bike everywhere. She met up with her friends daily. She went skiing every year with her same friends. Awesome. And she was 89 and she continued to do this forever. And it would be very unusual if she didn't go out on her bike and her other friends every day to get to the shops to do this. That's just how they commute. And then if you went out at like 5 or 6 in the morning and hiked a hill, you wouldn't see anyone under the age of 40. They'd all be like 50 and 60 and 70 and out with their friends hiking. And it's just a different mentality and a different culture. They're just so much. I would say the older generation were definitely, fit and healthy. And so, unfortunately, I don't feel that the Western cultures have really got that same mentality, and I think it's just getting worse. I'm quite concerned, like with the younger generation spending so much time not moving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even just, when we left California, which is, California, New York, probably, the two hubs of hustle, right? Where everyone's just, everyone's hustling, everyone's working, everyone's in traffic, everyone's crazy. And then coming up here to Northwest Montana and spending some time up here and seeing how active the older generations are. I mean, you see, there's at the ski mountain that we go to every year, Whitefish Mountain, there's a vertical contest. So if you have a season pass, you can track how much vertical you're doing. And the winners, the top 5 are all people in their 70s. Granted, they're retired, but these people are out every day. And then you get on the hiking trails, it's people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. It's so inspirational just to see that type of culture, where it's so much more valued. Lifestyle is valued so much more higher than some of the other parts of the country. So I think it's also regional. And, it's an interesting conversation about, the concerns that you have for, Western culture and the younger generations too. And I'd be curious because I tend to believe that the future of the fitness profession, is going from a fitness professional to a health professional to a health coach, right? Because that's where we can make the biggest impact. And I think people need to maybe start paying attention a little bit. And I'd be curious to hear, if from your experience, because you've done it, if I'm listening and I'm a fitness professional, I'm a coach or strength and conditioning coach, or, I do group classes or I do personal training. How do you start progressing towards a health coach? Like, how do you start changing your education? How do you start changing, your approach to your clients, and maybe how do you make a living? Like, is health, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes right now, is a health coach a big enough thing yet? Or do you think it's got a little ways to go?
Yeah, well, I guess sort of before I even answer that, or as part of that, I want to talk about like measuring things.
Yeah.
Because we were just talking about the older generation, and I feel like they measure importance of things differently as you get older. So therefore they're not working as much because they realize the importance, their life's almost over and they want to enjoy it. And for me, a big realization with the fitness industry and is what are you measuring? And is that in line with your values? So, for example, you might say to yourself, I've done 20 kilometer run today at X pace. I feel like I've had a successful day because I'm basing it on that. Whereas, and definitely I see that that's very common. Whereas now it's like, well, hang on, you told me that longevity and being fit and healthy, and for you when you're 60 to be able to play with your grandkid is really important to you. But if you're measuring your heart rate and how much you can push your heart in a 20 kilometer run every day, is that really in line with what your long-term goals are and measuring? And so therefore, just being a fitness coach or a personal trainer, you're potentially not necessarily measuring the right things. In saying that, of course, fitness coaches and personal trainers are becoming way more aware of this. And so now instead of measuring things like that, they're measuring, hey, why don't you wear the Oura Ring and let's track your sleep. And you know what? You didn't have enough sleep last night, so you really shouldn't be. We're not going to do a HIIT workout. We're actually going to just work on some mobility today based on what you told me how you feel and the fact that, you didn't get much sleep, your quality of sleep wasn't very good. And so now we're using things like the Whoop or the Oura Ring and to measure. And so now what the client's doing is going, oh, I'm not going to try and smash myself today. In fact, tonight I'm going to go to bed earlier and I'm going to start implementing some supplements that are going to help me do that. Or, you know what, I'm going to buy, like my recent purchase was a chili pad because there's a lot of science based on, having a cooler environment helps you sleep. And so now that I'm tracking my sleep, it's like it's a competition within myself. How much sleep can I get and how good a quality can that be? I want to do everything I can to optimize that. So I'm like, okay, well, this is what I've got to do before I go to bed and this is what I've got to do to, and the Wi-Fi's got to be off, and all these things that you implement, because now my goal is to get the best results, because I love measuring things, but now I'm measuring the things that actually are in line with my values. And so I guess in answer to your question, as a personal trainer or a fitness instructor, you're sort of limited to one piece of the puzzle. And as we spoke about before, it's not a big enough piece to make a difference. If you're totally stressed out in your life, then that's not going to help. But let's face it, how many really great personal trainers don't address all these issues anyway? They do. They have to. They, like, you can tell the difference between a good fitness instructor, a good personal trainer, and one that doesn't take any of those things into consideration. But being a health coach, I guess it just gives you the license to be able to do that. When I say the license, now it's a bit of a grey area, as I believe personal training is as well. So, like what I'm not sure of the rules in America, but do you actually even need to have a qualification to be considered a personal trainer? I think you probably do in terms of getting insurance. But like I know in Australia, you could actually call yourself a personal trainer and not actually have a certification. So it's a very grey area, and health coaching is similar. There is now, I believe, a body that you can be certified with, but to be honest, it doesn't really mean that much. There are some great health coaching courses that you can do to add to your repertoire, and that's definitely something that I would suggest doing if you want to be a holistic coach. But at the same time, you can educate yourself and be more knowledgeable than doing a course as well. So, I guess, what do you, Eric, I'm sure you know a lot more about, being certified and insurances and how that all works in the US.
Yeah, it's a huge gray area. I think that's the best way to put it. There's, it's just a young industry. So, the regulations thereof and every state's going to have different laws about, what is your scope of practice? What can you talk about? And, I think about if you're just addressing general lifestyle guidelines, like, sleep, hydration, basic nutrition, you're not, prescribing anything to people. You're generally in the clear. And it's one of those things too. It's like people come in because they want, they believe what they want is what they need, right? And that's the big differentiator. I think that's the struggle for a lot of people. And it's also like the marketing conundrum within the fitness industry is like, okay, how do we give people what they want? 6-week challenge, right? So that they can come in and then I can kind of slowly turn it into what they need, which is lifestyle guidelines, stress management, right? All of these things. So how do you do that? And so many people come in and they think, well, if I just join a gym and I show up 3 days a week, my life will be different. No, not really,
But I think also you've got to meet the client where they're at. Yes. And so if they think that, then that's fine. At least they've now committed to some time with you. And now it's up to you to educate them. And I think, that's the good coach. So it's about letting them get their goal or letting them reassess whether that's really their goal. And also selling them on what they actually need and making that become what they want.
Right.
And I don't think you need to be a health coach to be able to do that. I think any good coach can do that. And there are some great coaches out there now. But I do like what you said. It's about the need and want are normally very two different things. Unless the client is a bit older and then they sort of start to realize the importance of health. But yeah, really, really true. And so what sells, like for example, I run programs, and as a byproduct, most people lose weight because you start eating and living healthily. And so obviously that's a byproduct. But unless you sell it to people as you're going to lose weight, they don't want to know about it, because most people, all they care about is losing weight. And once again, I just want to come back to that Instagram photo, It's like This is the person that's lost a lot of weight, now has no bone density, is suffering from leaking gut, blah, blah, blah. This is the person that did it for long-term health, is a great weight, has, as a byproduct, has lost weight, but has also gained lean body mass, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It reminds me, I got to give credit to my old business partner too, Traver Boehm. We did a lifestyle fitness challenge at our gym years ago. And he kicked off the whole thing with just a great talk. He's like, and you look at Traver, he's like an Adonis, right? 6-pack abs, really, really fit guy. And he would say, it would start as like, who thinks I'm healthy, right? And everyone would be like, right? And there's like a picture of him with his shirt off on the projector. And he's like, next slide was his blood work. He's like, no, I'm not. Like, here's what's going on, right? Just looks are very deceiving when it comes to health, because, eventually as time goes on, what's going on the inside starts to show up on the outside. But you can get away with it for a while, right? For a very long time, maybe into your 40s, even 50s. And I think that's a huge thing. And but you're right. In order to get people from that path from, meet them where they're at with what they want, right, to getting them to understand what they actually need and wanting that takes a couple of things. It takes trust building and communication. And those are the soft skills that make people successful in our industry is, can you communicate and can you build trust, right? And if you have those two things, you can do a lot of great work. I mean, just taking someone wants to lose weight, if you can get them from understanding that going from 4 hours of sleep to 7 hours of sleep is probably the biggest factor in them losing weight. That takes some time, right? Because they want it in 4 weeks, which can, you can actually see a lot of results there. And that's a big thing. I think communication skills, and then, the ability to build trust.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And I guess on top of that is the ability to realize where your expertise lie and not going over those boundaries.
Yes.
So, and I guess that comes back to an insurance thing as well. But I work with a lot of other people to make the best results for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, I work with a strength and conditioning coach / physiotherapist. So they've actually, the two of them have both got credentials in that area as well. So if anyone has injuries, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an injury expert. Of course, I've seen a lot of injuries and whatever else, but there's no way that my knowledge is as good as theirs. And if I want to do the absolute best thing for my client, I've got to refer them to that person or those people. And in the same way, I can give them general, you shouldn't eat processed foods and this is what you should eat, and I'm going to help you through that and help with, any issues that you come up with, and I can be a talking board for you and whatever else. But at the end of the day, if that still doesn't work for you, then clearly you need blood work done and you need to see an integrated health physician. And based on your symptoms, this is the doctor that I would recommend for you, which is a different one for you. So having those connections of people that you think very highly of and you've worked with for a long time, or you've got really good results is absolute paramount. And if your client trusts you, which I'm sure they do because you're getting great results, then they're going to go and see whoever you recommend. And as a result, you're going to even look better because you're getting better results. So it's just a win-win for everyone,
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing to build that. I call it an adjunct network of people that you have that you refer to, they refer back. You trust them, them. That's a really powerful thing, and it adds a lot of value. And if you're listening, you're a fitness professional, it doesn't cost you anything. Go refer somebody, right? Go find someone that you can refer to and get to know them a little bit. It's an amazing way to build a long-standing business too. That's a really, really great point. So Ali, I know we're kind of running short on time, but give us some insights. Where do people find you? There's a lot of ways to find you online, your website, your podcast, all of that.
Yeah, or Instagram, I think is, can't remember. Ali Watts Fitness. Ali Watts Fitness. And that's probably enough for now. I've got a great community on Facebook, Ali Fitness community. So you can join there, and it's a private group, and we talk all things fitness and health. But reach out to me at ali@ali.fitness if you've got any questions, or if I can help you. I can definitely probably refer you to the right person if I can't.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Ali, it's always a pleasure. I'm so glad that you came in my world, and I'm so glad we got to share you today with our audience. And keep up the great work. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Hey, fitness fans, don't leave yet. It's your host, Eric Malzone, and I have a quick favor to ask. Actually, 3 favors. So, number 1, if you're a fan of our show, I asked you to do something that takes under 3 minutes. Go to iTunes, please, and subscribe to our show. Please, please, please. It means so much to us. It's so important. And then give us a favorable review. We would really, really appreciate it. And I can't tell you how much it means and helps us out. So I know it takes 2 minutes of your day, and it means a lot to us. So please do that. Number 2, go to our YouTube channel, our Fitness Marketing Alliance, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel there. Number 3, if you like this episode or any of the episodes that we've released, share it on social. That's huge. That's a big deal for us. And we put a lot of work into these episodes, trying to give you great, actionable content for the fitness industry. So that would mean a lot. And that's it. So we have some big plans coming up for this show. I'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes. But thank you so much for listening. It means so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I love to hear from everybody. Eric, ERIC, at fitnessmarketingalliance.com.